My name's Freddie. Welcome to this SketchUp tutorial for Woodworking UK. There's been some talk about SketchUp on the site over the years, and a few people have expressed some frustration with the fact that they can't get it to work the way that they want to, or really they just don't know where to start. So what I want to do today is really just give you a very basic overview of how it works, and we'll run through what you can see on the screen here. We'll talk a little bit about these axes because they're really very important, and if you get your head around them, then the rest of it is easy. And we'll talk a little bit about a few of the tools that you can see in this massive array here. We're not going to go into too much depth. Really, I just want to give you an idea of how it works so that you can start modeling with it and start getting your ideas onto your screen, and then hopefully into your workshop and into actual woodwork. If this goes down well and people find it useful, then we can go into a little bit more depth in the future and start talking about things like groups and components and so on and so forth, which just add a whole new dimension to the way that you can construct models in SketchUp. But that's a little bit more advanced, and we don't want to get too bogged down in that today. So without further ado, let's get stuck into it. This is the screen that you'll see when you open SketchUp on your computer. This is SketchUp Make on a Mac. You can download this from their site, or you can use SketchUp Free, which is their web-based application, which just runs on the internet and looks a little bit different from this, but I think it works in pretty much the same way once you get your head around the fact that you access the tools and stuff in slightly different ways. But this is, as we said, the screen that you'll see when you first open up the application. And this chap here generally just gets deleted. He is there really to give you a sense of scale, I guess. So if you left him there and you're drawing a table, you're not quite sure how tall you want to make it, but you want it about waist height, you can use him as a reference guide for that. What you're left with once he's gone are these three axes here, and now these are really important when it comes to using SketchUp because they're your frame of reference for everything that you draw. The blue one is the vertical axis, so that goes straight up. The green and the red are both lying effectively flat on the floor at 90 degrees to each other. So they, as I said, they're your points of reference for everything that you do within SketchUp. And when you come to draw lines or circles or whatever it happens to be, you'll use those as references so that the different lines and the faces that you use line up to each other in the ways that you're expecting. So just to illustrate that a little bit more, if we go over here and click on the line tool, which is the tool that we use to draw lines, unsurprisingly, we position it where we want it, click to start drawing a line, and then move your mouse or your trackpad or whatever it is that you're using out, and you start drawing a line. Down in the bottom right hand corner here, you can see the length of that line in millimeters. You can change that to be in inches or whatever if you want it. And what I was saying about the axes here, you can see that as we move along in this direction, that line goes green. Now that means that it's running parallel to the green axis, so it's flat on the floor and is running backwards from the way we're looking at it. If you rotate that around a bit, you can see it snaps to the red axis, and if you get it into that, you can see that it snaps on the blue axis. So let's start off just by drawing something quite simple, a square. I mentioned the dimensions down here in the corner earlier on. If you wish, if you want to be exact, you can actually type in the dimension that you want. So that will make a 2.5 meter long line. And you see it's drawn that line, and then you get this kind of rubber band thing with the cursor, and that now you can see we're drawing out along the red axis. we want that to be 2,500 as well, and you can see it will snap to that because we've used that dimension before. Click again, and there's another 2.5 meter line. Now, just looking at this screen here, it kind of illustrates, I think, what some people struggle with in SketchUp, because those two lines don't look the same length, but they are. You'll have to just trust me on that for the time being. Now then, while we're just finishing off this square, I just want to show you a couple of things that you can do with regard to the axes and to referencing them. That line there, we can see, is going along the green axis because the line is green. But you can actually lock it to that axis if you use the left arrow key on your keyboard. You can see that line has gone to bold and it says constrained on line, and that means that it doesn't matter what I do with the cursor, that line is always going to stay along that green axis. Now that means that you can use your cursor to reference other points in your model. So you can bring it down to there, and that will then draw a line straight down to this point here, and you can see that then if we run that pencil back over there, that's a red line along the red axis, and that completes our square. And you can see it's filled in, and that has now become a face. Now, as I said, that doesn't from this angle particularly look like a square. It looks a little bit skewed, but that's just purely because of the angle that we're looking at it from. If you go over to here and get your orbit tool, you can use that to rotate around and see that in actual fact you've drawn a perfect square. Just while we're on the subject of selecting tools, just purely a matter of speed, there are keyboard shortcuts for most of the tools that you'll use, and it's really worthwhile. If you learn them, you'll save yourself a lot of time as you're modeling. I think there's a sheet that you can print off probably from the Sketchup website, which tells you what all of those shortcuts are, and if you just have it next to you while you're modeling, you'll soon pick up that, for instance, if you want to draw a line, it's L. You can see the cursor changes. If you want to orbit, it's O. If you want to move, it's M. And that will just save you a lot of time as you come to use the program more and draw more involved models. So there is our basic square, and let's say, for instance, we want to make it into a cube. There's a couple of ways we can go about doing that. We can get our line tool and we can draw up 2,500 and then go around and fill out that square, and we can draw in the rest of the faces. Another useful keyboard shortcut, by the way, is Command Z, which is undo. If you're anything like me, you'll use that a lot more than you use anything else. A much quicker way, though, to turn that into a cube is to use the push-pull tool, which is that one there, or P on your keyboard. Press P, and that'll change straight into the push-pull tool. Move that over your face. You can see the face highlights. Press it once, and then you can pull it up as far as you want, or you can pull it down in the other direction. Again, if you wish, you can use the keyboard to enter in the distance that you want to pull it to, and there you go. There's your cube. So while we've got that cube on the screen, I'm just going to quickly talk about the select tool, which you'll use probably quite a lot. That's the spacebar on your keyboard, by the way, and you can use the select tool to select various parts of your model. if you click once on a face, for instance, or on a line, then it will select that face or that line. If you double click, it will select that face and everything connected to it. So as you can see, that's selected the whole of that square. If you triple click, it will select everything that is touching that face in any way whatsoever. You can also use it to, incidentally, if you want to deselect, you just move away and click away from your model and it will deselect everything. You can also use it to drag and select like that. There are two ways you can do this. If you drag from the left to the right, then it will select just what is completely within that box. If you drag from the right to the left, you can see you get a dashed box rather than a solid one, and that will select everything within that. Sorry, that will select everything that is even partially inside that box. So you can see there that's selected a whole load of stuff, even though it wasn't entirely in the box. So that is the select tool, and there are, with all of these tools, there are various what are called modifiers, which are usually the option key, the command key, or the shift key, which will make them do slightly different things. So for instance, with the select key, if you want to add more to the selection that you've made, then you can hold the shift key. That's not particularly uncommon. I think a lot of programs work in that way, and Sketchup is no different. But when we come to talking about things like the move, the move tool, which we'll do in a second, then it becomes a lot more useful to use the modifiers. So we're speaking about the move tool, which is this one here, which is M on your keyboard. And there's a couple of ways that you can use this. You can move single things at a time. So for instance, let's say you want to move that point. You can do that. If you decide, incidentally, once you've picked it up that you don't want to move it, hit the escape key and it'll all go back to normal. Or much more useful, you can select the things that you want to move. So let's say you want to move that whole face. You can move that in exactly the same way. You can also, in exactly the same way, lock the direction in which you're moving things. So if you hit the right, sorry, that's the left key, then you'll move it just along the green axis. If you hit the right key, yeah, then you'll move it just purely along the red axis. If you hit the up key, then it's just going to move purely along the vertical blue axis. So that is the basic function of the move key. What you'll probably find is that you will use the copy function of the move tool a lot more. So if you hit, it's the Alt key on a Mac. On a PC, I'm not quite sure what they call it, but it's one of the ones down to the left of the space bar. And when you hit the right one, you'll see a little plus sign appear next to your move tool, just like that. And then when you select something to move, you actually create a complete new copy of it, and you can move that around and put it where you want. If you select more, for instance, if you select the whole thing, then you can then move, sorry, if you hit Alt, then you create a complete copy of that and you can move it to where you want. And it will snap as well to things like points and intersections and so on, just to make it easier for you to position it. You can also, as you can see down at the bottom, there's a distance in the bottom right. You can enter, if you particularly want to move that, I don't know, 5 meters. You can just enter that in there and it will move 5 meters. As we can see, if we use the next of our keys, which is the tape measure, which is that one there, or T on your keyboard, and we can see that we have moved that 5 meters. You can use your tape measure for more than just measuring distances of things that you already know. You can also use it to put in guide points. So if you wanted to draw a line, let's say, I don't know, 2 meters up of the side of this cube, then you can just type in 2000, hit return, and you can see it's putting that little guide point there, which your cursor will snap to and allow you to draw extra lines if you wish. So we don't really need that line there, so we'll just select that, delete it. You can also select and delete guide points, and we don't particularly need that, so we'll just get rid of that as well. And I just want to show you a couple of other tools for this session, and then maybe we'll look at drawing something that is a little bit more interesting. But before we do that, the first tool we're going to look at is the rotate tool, which is Q on your keyboard, and this does exactly as you'd expect. It rotates, but it's a little bit more complex because it rotates around whatever axis you tell it to. So that will rotate along the green axis, or around the green axis, I should say. That's going to rotate around the blue axis. So you just need to be a little bit aware of that when you're using it, and it can take a little bit of getting used to. The other thing that you need to do is to select everything that you want to rotate first. For instance, if I just select that top face and then click to rotate around that point in the blue axis, then it's going to do something a bit like that, which is funky, but probably not necessarily what you want. So if we press escape to get rid of that, go back to our select tool and select the whole box, we can then rotate all of it. And again, you'll see you've got the angle that you're rotating down in the bottom right here. And the other thing that you can do with the rotate key is you can use the Alt key as well to make a copy, much the same as with the move tool, and you can then rotate that around to make copies of things. So you just made your box twice as big. So just getting rid of that, because it's just an illustration. That's the rotate tool. The only other thing that I wanted to show you just very quickly is these tools up here. You've got the rectangle, rotated rectangle, circle and polygon tools, and you can use those as you would expect to draw those shapes. So a rectangle, you just click once and pull your cursor out and it will draw you a rectangle. You can see the dimensions as ever down in the bottom right. You can also enter the dimensions of your rectangle separated by a comma, and it will draw that automatically. It will snap to certain things like squares. There we go, that's drawing a square. Or the other one is what's called the golden section, which is a ratio of the length of the sides that is supposedly very, very pleasing to the eye. Apparently, the pyramids are all based on it, and as are the A paper sizes. So there's your useless piece of information for the day. So that's the rectangle tool. The circle tool, very, very easy. You click for the center of the circle, pull it out to whatever size you want, and then once you've drawn your circle, you can do all of the usual things with it, like push it, pull it, and so on and so forth. The polygon, it will automatically draw a hexagon out of kind of the default setting, and you can rotate that as well, so the sides are going in the direction that you want them to. You can see the line there is snapping to the green axis or to the red axis, but you can obviously set it anywhere in between as well. It will probably make your life easier in the long run if you keep it snapped to one of those two axes. If you don't want to draw a polygon, or sorry, if you don't want to draw a hexagon, you can change the number of sides in the box down at the bottom, type the number you want, and hit return, and it will draw you a triangle, or it will draw you a heptagon, or whatever you want. Probably not going to use that too much, because I would guess that heptagons are quite difficult to machine. So that is a basic rundown of some of the tools. There was actually, while I think of it, just one more that I wanted to show you, which is the scale tool, which is that one there, or S on your keyboard, and that you can use to change the size of things. You can scale them up, scale them down, invert them, do all those kind of things with it. So first of all, you select your object, and then you can scale it about the green scale, you can scale it around the red scale, or you can do a uniform scale, which is the whole thing. And again, you can put a ratio into the box. So if you want to make it twice as big, in the bottom right hand corner you can see there that's 1.5 times as big. If we go back a bit, you can make it 3 times as big, twice as big, whatever you want to do. Okay, so let's just get rid of that, and as I said, maybe try and show you how to use SketchUp to draw something a little bit more interesting. We're going to do a coffee table just because it's easy, and hopefully it will give you an idea of kind of the way that you can use this to build these kind of models really quite quickly. So we'll start with our rectangle tool, and we will draw a little square on the floor. Let's make it 100 mil square. Okay, and then that's going to be the base of one of our legs. So we get the pull tool, select that, and we'll push it up to be, yeah, 400 mil is probably about right for the height of a coffee table. We need more than one leg, so if we get the select tool, select all of that, then take our move key, but we're going to use it to make a copy. So we're going to hit M for move and then Alt for the copy. And there's our copy. Let's make the table 1 meter long. It'll be slightly over 1 meter actually, because it'll be 1 meter plus the width of the leg. And you can then select, if you hold the Shift key down, select both of those, use your move and your copy key again, so move and alt, sorry, and then you can move that out along the green axis to give you the other two legs. I can't remember if I mentioned that when you're using the move key, you can again lock the reference so that you move either only along the green axis, only along the red axis, or only along the blue axis. You do that in the same way as you would with the other functions using the arrow keys on your keyboard. So we're going to move those out to, let's say, 400 mil, which is about there. Okay, so there are your four legs. You can then draw your tabletop. If we get the rectangle tool again, use the P and push that up to, let's say, 50 mil. You can see that it hasn't pushed up the area over the legs because it sees that as a separate face. So you can just, if you double click with your push pull tool on the legs, then it will automatically push them up the same different distance as you have just done. So it remembers your last action and will just copy that if you double click. And you can then go around and delete these extra lines to give you a nice flat coffee tape. And there we go. That's obviously a very, very simple, very, very quick example, but I hope it gives you an idea of how quickly and easily you can build these models up in SketchUp. I've just pressed the wrong button there. As I said, if this goes down well and if people find it interesting, if there's anything that I haven't made clear and that you, if you have any questions or anything like that, then please pop a note in the comments and I will try and answer it if I can. As I say, if people find it useful, then I will have a look at maybe doing another one and going into a little bit more depth with things like groups and components, which I know cause a little bit of confusion. So I'm going to sign off there. I hope it's been useful, and please let me know. I'm sure you will. You're not a shy bunch generally. Yeah, if it has been useful, let me know. If it hasn't, then, well, keep it to yourself. Thanks for your time. It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye.